The metallic clang of the lunch tray hitting the linoleum floor echoed through Franklin Elementary's cafeteria, like a gunshot. 12-year-old Marcus Williams watched in stunned silence as his turkey sandwich, apple slices, and chocolate milk scattered across the pristine white tiles. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into his small wrists as Officer Rodriguez tightened them behind his back, the clicking sound drowning out the horrified gasps of 300 children. 10 minutes earlier, Marcus had been laughing with his best friend Tyler about their upcoming science project presentation. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual midday chaos. Hundreds of young voices creating a symphony of childhood energy. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the long tables, where students clustered in their familiar groups. The smell of institutional meatloaf and disinfectant mingled in the air, a scent that would forever remind Marcus of this moment. He stood in the free lunch line, same as always, clutching his worn student ID card. The laminated edge had begun peeling from months of nervous fidgeting during math tests. Mrs. Patterson, the kind lunch lady with graying hair and gentle eyes, had served him every day for 3 years. She knew his name, asked about his little sister Maya, and sometimes slipped an extra cookie into his tray when she thought no one was looking. But Mrs. Patterson wasn't working the line today. Instead, Karen Whitmore stood behind the serving counter, her bleached blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that seemed to stretch her already pinched features. She'd been hired just 2 weeks ago, and her pale blue eyes surveyed the students with the suspicious intensity of a prison guard. Her thin lips remained pressed into a permanent frown as she mechanically slopped portions onto each tray. Marcus approached the counter with his usual shy smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Free lunch, please." He held up his ID card, the same routine he'd performed hundreds of times before. Karen's eyes narrowed as she examined the card, then studied Marcus's face with undisguised skepticism. "Free lunch, huh?" Her voice carried a sharp edge that made several nearby students glance over nervously. "You sure about that, boy?" The word boy hung in the air like a slap. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment as other children began to stare. "Yes, ma'am. I'm on the free lunch program. My mom filled out all the paperwork at the beginning of the year." Karen snatched the ID card from his trembling fingers, examining it as if it were a counterfeit bill. "This doesn't look right to me, and I saw you take extra crackers from the salad bar. That's stealing, young man." Marcus's stomach dropped. He hadn't taken any crackers. He hadn't even been to the salad bar yet. "I didn't take anything extra, ma'am. I promise. You can ask Mrs. Patterson. She knows me." "Mrs. Patterson isn't here, and I don't know you from Adam." Karen's voice rose, causing heads to turn throughout the cafeteria. "I've been watching you kids all week, thinking you can just waltz in here and take whatever you want. Well, not on my watch." The lunch line had come to a complete standstill. Students behind Marcus shuffled nervously, their excited chatter dying to whispers. Mrs. Chen, one of the 5th grade teachers, noticed the commotion and began walking toward the serving area, her brow furrowed with concern. Karen grabbed the phone mounted on the wall behind the counter. Her fingers stabbed at the numbers with violent precision. "This is Karen Whitmore at Franklin Elementary. I need police assistance immediately. We have a theft situation in the cafeteria." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Ma'am, please. I didn't steal anything. You can check the cameras. I just want my lunch." "The cameras will prove exactly what I saw," Karen snapped, her voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. "You took extra food that you weren't entitled to, and when I confronted you about it, you became belligerent and disrespectful." Mrs. Chen reached the counter just as Karen hung up the phone. What's going on here, Marcus? Are you all right? This child attempted to steal extra food items, Karen announced loudly, ensuring everyone within earshot could hear. I caught him red-handed, taking crackers from the salad bar without paying. And when I questioned him about his free lunch status, he became aggressive. Marcus looked up at Mrs. Chen with pleading eyes. I didn't do anything wrong. Mrs. Chen, I promise. I was just trying to get my lunch like always. Mrs. Chen's jaw tightened as she studied Karen's triumphant expression. She'd taught at Franklin for 15 years and knew Marcus well. He was quiet, respectful, and struggled academically, but never caused trouble. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Marcus is a good student, and he's been on the free lunch program all year. Good student or not, theft is theft. Karen replied coldly. And I won't stand by while these children think they can get away with whatever they please. The cafeteria had fallen into an eerie silence. 300 children sat frozen at their tables, watching the drama unfold with wide, frightened eyes. Many had stopped eating entirely, their attention riveted on the confrontation. The usual sounds of clattering utensils and animated conversation had been replaced by an oppressive quiet that seemed to press down on everyone present. Officer Rodriguez arrived within 5 minutes, his heavy boots echoing against the tile floor as he strode through the cafeteria entrance. He was a large man with graying temples and tired eyes who'd been working the school beat for over a decade. Behind him walked his partner, Officer Thompson, a younger woman with sharp features and an eager expression. What seems to be the problem here? Rodriguez asked, his voice professionally neutral as he approached the serving counter. Karen launched into her account with dramatic flair, her voice rising and falling for maximum effect. This boy here attempted to steal extra food from our salad bar. When I confronted him about it, he became hostile and started arguing with me. I believe he may also be fraudulently using someone else's free lunch card. Marcus felt his world tilting sideways. The words fraudulently and steal seemed to echo in his ears like accusations from a courtroom. Officer, I didn't steal anything. I just wanted to get my regular lunch. I've been getting free lunch here for 3 years. Officer Thompson stepped forward, her hand resting on her utility belt. Son, we need you to come with us so we can sort this all out. Wait just a minute. Mrs. Chen moved protectively closer to Marcus. This child hasn't done anything wrong. I've been teaching here for 15 years, and Marcus is one of our most respectful students. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. More teachers had begun gathering around the scene. Mr. Davis, the principal, pushed through the crowd of staff members, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious stress. Officers, perhaps we should discuss this situation in my office rather than in front of the entire student body. Karen's voice cut through the diplomatic suggestions like a knife. There's nothing to discuss. I witnessed this child stealing food, and when confronted, he became argumentative and disrespectful. The law is the law, regardless of age. Officer Rodriguez looked uncomfortable with the situation, but felt compelled to follow protocol. I'm sorry, but if there's been an accusation of theft, we need to investigate properly. Son, I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning. The moment the handcuffs appeared, the cafeteria erupted. Children began crying, some screaming for their teachers. Several stood on their chairs to get a better view, while others cowered under their tables. The sound of 300 young voices expressing shock, fear, and confusion created a cacophony that seemed to shake the very walls. Marcus stood frozen as Officer Thompson approached with the cuffs. His 12-year-old mind couldn't process what was happening. One moment, he'd been a normal 6th grader waiting for lunch, and the next, he was being treated like a criminal in front of his entire school. "This is completely unnecessary," Mrs. Chen protested, her voice rising above the chaos. "He's a child, not a hardened criminal. You can't handcuff a 12-year-old over alleged crackers." "Ma'am, please step back," Officer Thompson replied firmly. "We're following standard procedure for theft investigations." As the cold metal closed around Marcus's wrists, his lunch tray slipped from his numb fingers and crashed to the floor. The sound seemed to punctuate the absurdity of the entire situation. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, and chocolate milk scattered across the linoleum like the remnants of his dignity. Tyler, Marcus's best friend, jumped up from his table and started running toward the commotion. "Leave him alone. Marcus didn't do anything wrong." His young voice cracked with emotion as two teachers gently but firmly guided him back to his seat. The walk from the cafeteria to the principal's office felt like a funeral march. Marcus kept his head down, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes following his every step. He could hear whispers and gasps from students he'd known since kindergarten. The shame burned in his chest like acid, making it difficult to breathe. In Mr. Davis's office, the questions came rapid fire. Officer Rodriguez attempted to maintain some gentleness in his tone, but the interrogation felt brutal to Marcus's young ears. Where did he get the ID card? Had he ever taken extra food before? Why was he arguing with the cafeteria worker? Each question felt like another weight added to his shoulders. "I didn't argue with her," Marcus repeated for the fourth time, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just asked for my regular free lunch. I've never taken anything extra. Mrs. Patterson knows me. She can tell you." Mr. Davis leaned forward in his chair, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "Officers, I've known this child for 3 years. His academic records show no behavioral problems, and he's never been sent to my office for disciplinary action. His mother works 2 jobs to support their family, and he qualifies for our free lunch program through the proper channels." Karen stood in the corner with her arms crossed, her expression smug and self-satisfied. "I know what I saw. This boy took extra crackers from the salad bar, and when I confronted him about it, he became belligerent. Children today have no respect for authority, and someone needs to teach them that actions have consequences." Officer Thompson was taking notes in a small pad, her pen scratching across the paper with mechanical precision. "We'll need to review any security footage you might have, and interview witnesses. This is a serious accusation." "Of course it's serious," Karen interjected. "Theft is theft, regardless of the perpetrator's age. If we don't address these behaviors early, who knows what these children will grow up to become?" The implication in her words hung heavy in the air. Mrs. Chen, who had insisted on staying for the questioning, felt her anger building like pressure in a steam kettle. She'd seen enough racist assumptions in her teaching career to recognize the ugly undertones of Karen's comments. Meanwhile, news of Marcus's arrest had spread through the school like wildfire. Teachers texted each other in shocked disbelief. Parents arriving for afternoon pickup were met with whispered accounts from their children. The school's phone lines began ringing as confused and angry voices demanded explanations. Mrs. Williams received the call at her job at the medical supply warehouse, where she worked as a shipping clerk. The voice on the other end belonged to Mr. Davis, and his words seemed to come from a nightmare. "Mrs. Williams, I'm afraid there's been an incident at school involving Marcus. You need to come in immediately." She dropped everything and raced across town, her heart pounding with every terrible possibility. Traffic lights seemed to last forever, and her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. Marcus was her baby, her quiet, sensitive boy who helped his little sister with homework and never caused trouble. When she burst through the school's front doors, the receptionist's sympathetic expression told her everything she needed to know. "Mrs. Williams, they're in the principal's office. I'm so sorry about this whole situation." The sight of her son sitting in a chair with his hands still cuffed behind his back nearly brought her to her knees. His eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and his shoulders shook with barely contained sobs. "Marcus, baby, what happened?" Officer Rodriguez had the decency to look ashamed as he explained the situation to Mrs. Williams. Her disbelief quickly turned to fury as she learned about Karen's accusations and the complete lack of evidence supporting them. "You handcuffed my 12-year-old son over crackers." Her voice rose with each word. "Crackers that no one can prove he even took. Are you out of your minds?" Karen stepped forward with renewed confidence. "Your son was stealing food and became aggressive when confronted. I won't be intimidated by hostile parents defending criminal behavior." Mrs. Williams whirled around to face the woman who had traumatized her child. "Criminal behavior. He's 12 years old and wanted his lunch. What's criminal is how you've treated my son based on your own prejudices." "This has nothing to do with prejudice," Karen replied icily. "It has to do with theft and disrespect for authority." "Mr. Davis cleared his throat loudly. "I think we need to review the security footage before this goes any further. Our cameras cover the entire cafeteria, including the salad bar area." For the first time since the incident began, Karen's confident expression flickered slightly. "The cameras will show exactly what I witnessed." The security office was cramped and smelled of stale coffee and electronic equipment. Banks of monitors displayed various angles of the school's interior, their screens flickering with black and white images. Mr. Johnson, the school's security coordinator, pulled up the cafeteria footage from the relevant time period. Everyone crowded around the main monitor as the timestamp showed 11:47 a.m., just minutes before the confrontation began. The image quality was grainy, but clear enough to follow individual students moving through the lunch line and around the salad bar. "There!" Karen pointed at the screen as Marcus appeared in the frame. "Watch him carefully. You'll see him take the crackers." They watched Marcus approach the lunch line, show his ID card to Karen, and wait patiently for his food. The camera angle showed the salad bar clearly, and Marcus never went near it. He stood in the lunch line the entire time, occasionally shifting his weight from foot to foot as children do when waiting. Mr. Johnson rewound the footage and played it again at half speed. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus had never approached the salad bar, never taken any crackers, and had behaved respectfully throughout the entire interaction until Karen became hostile. The silence in the security office was deafening. Officer Rodriguez removed his hat and ran his hand through his graying hair. "Ma'am, the footage doesn't support your account of events. The boy never went to the salad bar." Karen's face flushed red as she stared at the monitor. "The camera must have missed it. I know what I saw. Maybe he took them earlier. Or maybe the angle doesn't show everything." "The cameras have been recording all morning," Mr. Johnson replied quietly. "I can show you every moment Marcus was in the cafeteria today. He never took anything extra." Mrs. Williams felt a mixture of vindication and renewed fury. Her son had been humiliated, traumatized, and handcuffed based on a complete lie. "I want those handcuffs removed from my son immediately, and I want a full apology from everyone involved in this travesty." Officer Thompson unlocked the handcuffs with visible embarrassment. The marks they'd left on Marcus's small wrists made everyone in the room wince. "I'm sorry about this," "Son, we should have reviewed the footage before taking any action." Marcus rubbed his wrists and looked up at his mother with wounded eyes. "I tried to tell them I didn't do anything wrong, but nobody would listen to me." The words hit everyone in the room like physical blows. A 12-year-old child had been telling the truth, and every adult in authority had chosen to believe a lie instead. The weight of that realization settled on their shoulders like lead blankets. Karen retreated to the corner of the security office. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "I was sure I saw him take something. Maybe I was mistaken about which child it was." "You weren't mistaken," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "You saw exactly what you expected to see based on your own assumptions about my student." The drive home from school was silent, except for Marcus's occasional sniffles. Mrs. Williams gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with suppressed rage. How was she supposed to explain to her son that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes based on prejudice and fear? That evening, word of the incident spread through the community like wildfire. Parents shared the story on social media, their posts filled with outrage and disbelief. The local news picked up the story, and by the next morning, Franklin Elementary was surrounded by reporters and protesters demanding justice. Mrs. Williams had barely slept, holding Marcus as he cried himself to exhaustion. Her own tears came later, in the privacy of her bathroom where her children couldn't see them. How many more times would she have to watch her son's innocence be chipped away by the world's cruelty? The school board called an emergency meeting for the following evening. The high school auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, students, and community members. The air crackled with tension as people filed into their seats, their faces grim with determination. Marcus sat in the front row with his mother and little sister Maya. He'd begged to stay home, but Mrs. Williams insisted he needed to see that the community would stand up for him. "Baby, sometimes when bad things happen, good people come together to make them right." Karen entered the auditorium through a side door, her face pale and drawn. She'd spent the day fielding angry phone calls and reading furious social media posts. Her initial defiance had crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny and the undeniable evidence of her mistake. Dr. Martinez, the superintendent, took the podium first. Her usually composed demeanor showed cracks of strain as she addressed the packed auditorium. "We're here tonight to address a serious incident that occurred at Franklin Elementary yesterday. An incident that should never have happened and will never happen again." The crowd murmured approvingly, but their expressions remained skeptical. Words were easy. Action was what mattered. Mr. Davis stood next, his face haggard from 24 hours of crisis management. "I want to publicly apologize to Marcus Williams and his family for the trauma they experienced in our school. The actions taken were completely unjustified and represent a failure of our system to protect our students." Mrs. Patterson, the regular lunch lady who'd been off sick during the incident, requested permission to speak. Her voice shook with emotion as she addressed the crowd. "I've served lunch to Marcus Williams for 3 years. He's one of the most polite, respectful children I've ever met. What happened to him is an absolute disgrace." When Karen was called to the podium, the auditorium fell silent. She approached slowly, her hands trembling as she gripped the microphone. "I want to apologize to Marcus and his family. I made a terrible mistake, and I let my own fears and prejudices cloud my judgment." The admission of prejudice sent a ripple through the crowd. Some people nodded approvingly at her honesty, while others remained stone-faced and unforgiving. "I saw a young black boy and immediately assumed the worst." Karen continued, her voice breaking. I projected my own biases onto an innocent child and caused him unimaginable pain. There's no excuse for what I did. Marcus looked up at his mother, confusion evident in his young eyes. He was still trying to understand why the color of his skin had anything to do with wanting lunch at school. Mrs. Williams squeezed his hand gently, promising herself that she'd find the right words to explain later. Tyler's mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, stood up in the audience. My son came home yesterday, traumatized by what he witnessed. He kept asking me why the police would arrest Marcus for being hungry. How do I explain that to an 11-year-old? Other parents began sharing their children's reactions to the incident. Students had experienced nightmares, anxiety attacks, and a fundamental loss of trust in the adults meant to protect them. The ripple effects of Karen's false accusation had touched every family in the school community. Mrs. Chen requested permission to speak about the broader implications of the incident. This wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was racial profiling in its most insidious form. Marcus was seen as suspicious simply because he was a black child in a free lunch line. The teacher's words sparked heated discussions throughout the auditorium. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, forced to confront their own unconscious biases. Others nodded vigorously, grateful that someone was finally naming the ugly truth underlying the incident. Dr. Martinez returned to the podium to announce the board's decisions. Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore's employment with our district has been terminated. We are also implementing mandatory bias training for all staff members and revising our policies regarding law enforcement involvement in school matters. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some people applauded, believing justice had been served. Others felt the punishment was insufficient for the trauma inflicted on Marcus and the broader school community. Mrs. Williams was invited to address the gathering. She approached the podium with dignity, her head held high despite the pain in her eyes. My son Marcus is a good boy who deserves to eat lunch at school without being treated like a criminal. What happened to him was wrong. But what happens next will determine what kind of community we really are. Her words resonated through the auditorium like a challenge. Would this be just another incident that faded from memory? Or would it become a catalyst for real change? Over the following weeks, the community surprised everyone with their sustained commitment to transformation. Parents organized cultural competency workshops. Teachers revised their classroom materials to be more inclusive. Students formed peer mediation groups to address bias and discrimination. Marcus slowly began to heal, though the scars of the incident would remain with him forever. Classmates who had witnessed his humiliation became fiercely protective of him, creating an informal support network that followed him through his remaining years at Franklin Elementary. 6 months later, at the school's annual awards assembly, Marcus was honored with a special recognition for his courage and grace in the face of injustice. As he walked across the stage to accept the award, the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Mrs. Williams watched from the audience with tears streaming down her face. Her son had survived something no child should have to endure. But he'd also witnessed the power of community action and the possibility of redemption. The boy who walked across that stage was still her Marcus. But he was also stronger, more aware, and surrounded by people who would fight for his dignity. Karen had moved to another state shortly after losing her job, unable to face the daily reminders of her actions. She'd sent a letter to the Williams family, continuing her apology and promising to dedicate her life to fighting the prejudices that had led to Marcus's traumatization. Whether her transformation was genuine remained to be seen. But the letter represented a first step toward accountability. The incident at Franklin Elementary became a case study in how quickly situations can escalate when bias meets authority. But it also became a testament to the power of truth, the importance of community solidarity, and the resilience of the human spirit. Marcus would carry the memory of that day with him always, but he would also carry the memory of how his community had rallied around him. In the end, that might have been the most valuable lesson of all, that even in the darkest moments, there are people willing to stand up and say that every child deserves dignity, respect, and the simple right to eat lunch without fear. Years later, when Marcus graduated as valedictorian of his high school class, he would dedicate his speech to every child who had ever been misjudged, marginalized, or misunderstood. His words would echo through the auditorium and beyond, reminding everyone present that the true measure of a community lies not in its perfection, but in its willingness to confront its failures and fight for something better. The lunch tray that had crashed to the floor that terrible day had been more than just scattered food and spilled milk. It had been the sound of injustice colliding with innocence, of prejudice meeting truth, and ultimately, of a community discovering its capacity for both cruelty and redemption. In the end, redemption had won, but only because enough people had decided to make it so.